1, 2, 3.
Welcome to Scealta. My name is Joe Austin. And for those who have just joined us, let me remind you Scealta is a joint production of Welsh Affairs to Hear and Feel on Public. Over the year, we have had guests from every walk of life. We have had people from the music end of life. We've had writers. We've had people who are entrepreneurs. We've had poets. We've had a whole variety. And one of my difficulties as the person who does the interviewing is trying sometimes, not always, sometimes, is to find things that the person has done that perhaps they've forgotten. My difficulty with my guest this evening is exactly the opposite. He's done too much, and it's nearly our hour long is certainly not long enough. I timed myself last night with the questions that I would like to ask in their 2.5 hours. So what I've decided to do is be quiet and let Michael Dowling tell his story, his journey, as he calls it, his interesting life. So let me just put it into the context. So Michael Dowling is the President and Chief Executive of Northwell Health. It's the largest, as I understand it, it's the largest health provider in New York State. It has under its control 25 hospitals, 800 outpatient facilities, 74,000 employees, and has a budget of about 11 million. He is an accomplished writer, which we'll come to, and I want to talk about his current book. And he's done all of this with a smile on his face. So, Michael, for the journey that you've been on, I want to sit back and listen. So, where did it begin?
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you guys, and it's a privilege. So again, my thanks. So let me begin. I grew up in West Limerick, in a little village called Knockaderry, which is, for those people who know Limerick, it's near a town called Newcastle West, about 5 miles from Newcastle West. It's an agricultural community, small farmers, and this was now in the 1950s and 60s, because I was born in 49. So my father was a labourer, worked in the county council, very, very hard worker, could be a very difficult individual, but a very hard worker, who actually suffered from arthritis at a very, very young age. So at about the age of 40, he could no longer work because he was pretty well crippled with arthritis. And that he found that unbelievably difficult. My mother was just an absolutely wonderful woman, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. She was the rock of the household. She was deaf. She had lost her hearing when she was young. And there were various debates about how she lost her hearing. One argument, one reason was that she got medication that caused hearing loss. Another argument was that she got beaten by a teacher in a pretty bad way that caused the hearing loss. Either way, she could not hear. So the only way you could get my mother's attention was to knock on the floor. If you stomped your foot on the floor, she sensed the vibration and she could turn around, but you could scream at the top of your voice and she wouldn't hear. We grew up in a small thatch cottage, surrounded by small farmers. The thatch cottage, had the mud walls, the thatch roof, the hardened mud floor, and we had no electricity, no running water, no bathrooms, no heat. People always ask me, did you have an outhouse? I said, no, we did not have an outhouse. The outhouse was the local ditch that you went to. You just had to be very careful, as you know very well. And as Irish people know that when you went in the middle of the night, you had to make sure you didn't sit on nettles. Otherwise, you had a bit of a problem. There were 5 of us. I was the oldest. The house, back to the house again for a second, it had 3 rooms. One room where all of us slept, the middle room, which was the living room, if you could call it that, with a big open fireplace. The fireplace was around 6-7 feet wide, about 5 or 6 feet tall. It was on that fireplace that my mother cooked everything, and they had a bellows next to the fireplace. So, and a lot of kids today don't even know what that is or can't even appreciate it. And but my mother cooked everything there. The ceiling in the living room and in the bedrooms was canvas bags that we would nail canvas bags to the rafters, and then we would distemper them white, paint them white. So it looked like a ceiling, except it was bags. And the funny thing, which I've written about a little bit, is that rats used to live in the thatch. So my brother and I would play games. He would stand on one side of the room with his hurley and hit the bag, and the rat would run to the other side, and I would hit the other side, and the rat would run back. So we would play games with the rats. And at nighttime, we would set rat traps next to the fireplace because the rats would come down at night. And then in the middle of the night, invariably, you'd hear the big noise of the rat trap catching the rat. You'd hear the squeal of the rat, and then you would jump out of bed, catch the rat by the tail, and throw the rat out the front door. I find it interesting because these days, I have a daughter who's 30. If she sees a spider in a room today, she flies out of the room screaming that there is a massive animal in the room, and it's a little spider. So I keep telling her, just grab your fingers, catch the spider, and kill it. But it's a different world. The community was there was a kind of a class system in the community. You were poor like we were. You were not expected to be that successful. There was always this attitude, you're down there, you'll be nice to the people that are better off than you, but don't aspire to anything great. My brother often called it as the cacophony of no's. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. One of the things about growing up was my mother was just absolutely a phenomenal person, extraordinary. And even though she was deaf, she never considered herself having a disability at all. She treated everybody in a wonderful, wonderful, humane way. And she also loved to read. So she loved having books around. So I was very fortunate as a very young kid, and I loved to read. I still, to this day, read multiple books a month. I started reading when I was very young, and my favorite time was sitting in the corner or sometime with a candle, reading books. I read Shakespeare back then. I used to read the speeches of Churchill, etc. There is an American author named Zane Grey, who used to write country western books, and he wrote books about the western part of the United States. And I was always fascinated that he was able to write in such a way that when you read the pages, you could visualize the terrain he was talking about. He wrote in a wonderful way, and I've always tried to use that, even when you give a speech or something, is to try to describe what you're talking about so people can visualize what you're talking about.
Just interrupt for 1 second, because I want to add this in. You obviously have a very committed work ethos. You're a very hard worker. And
right.
The thing I read was that because of the family circumstance, that abject poverty, that really from the age of 10, you were more or less providing part of the income for the family.
Yes. I started working with local farmers. I worked in a local bottling factory. I cycled 5 or 6 miles. I started working when I was 12, 13. When I was 16, I went to England because I was the oldest. There were 5 of us. I was the oldest, and I had to figure out how to help out at home. I had 2 main dreams back as a kid. One was how to help out my family, especially my mother. And 2 is figure out a way to try to get to college. I had dreamed about college. I didn't understand what college was. I'd never been to a college. I had never seen a college. I had never had any counseling about college. I just knew that if you got to college, I thought that and by the way, I also thought that the only thing you could actually do when you went to college was to get a degree to become a teacher. I did not know, for example, there was a law school or a business school or a medical. I had no clue. So I went to England and I worked in Crawley, south of London, in a steel factory. And I had done my exams for my secondary school, And of course, as you know, you had to get certain grades in secondary school to be eligible to go to college. I remember being in England when I got the results, and I remember opening it very, very carefully just to see whether or not I had made the cut. And then I opened it and I had made the cut to get into college. But now, of course, the question was, how do you go to college? There's no money. There was no scholarships. And now my family had no money, and I was helping out at home anyway. So working in England helped me a little bit. One other thing that I want to mention at this point is sports was a big part of my life. I was a pretty good athlete. I played with all of the championship teams. Where I grew up was a very strong stronghold of hurling. Knockaderry was a powerful hurling area. And so we won the numerous championships. So hurling was huge for me. And being, reading, being on the field, playing were the two things that I remember most fondly about everything. So anyway, I was in England. I was eligible to go to college. I got into UCC. So when I came back from England, I had enough money to pay my tuition. And then I worked with a construction company called, it was the Barry's construction company. And he was very good to me. He allowed me to work a couple of weeks and then take weeks off. He gave me jobs on the weekend. I'd come home from college. He allowed me to work over Christmas. I was building homes, putting in sewer lines, all of that kind of stuff. So I did that. And college, I hitchhiked on a milk truck to get to college. And there's a little interesting story. I got to this part of Cork City, and I'm walking around an area with lots and lots and lots of buildings, and I'm looking for the college because I wanted to find something that said college. So I wanted to ask somebody, but I didn't, being a guy, you don't ask for directions that much. I saw a nun. I figured now the nun will be safe. So I asked the nun, by the way, could you tell me where the college is? And she said, well, son, you're in the middle of it. This is the college. So I was in the middle of this big thing. I then signed up for liberal arts. I joined. This is something I will never forget. I found out where you sign up to go for classes or whatever, get registered. And I was standing in the line, and I looked up at the door that I was facing, and it said liberal arts. I did not know what liberal arts were. And I remember getting cold sweat because I thought liberal arts meant that you drawing, that you were an art. And I'm thinking, I don't know how to do that. So I got up the courage to ask a student next to me, saying, what does that mean? He says, well, that's mean, if you want to become a teacher or whatever, this is where you go. I said, okay, I'm on the right line. So I signed up. I studied like crazy because I was worried about whether or not I had the potential to make it through college. It was new to me. But again, going back to hurling, I got on the college hurling team, UCC hurling team. And that to me was a massive confidence booster. We ended up winning the Fitzgibbon Cup over the years and winning county championships, etc. So I was on all those teams. But then at the end of the first year, then the question was, what do I do now? I have to figure out money for the next year. So I decided to come to the United States. So I came to the US. I came over by myself. I walked around Manhattan. I got a job down in the docks in Manhattan, in the west side of Manhattan. It was round the clock, 100-hour weeks, which was fine for me. I didn't socialize. To me, it was, I made good money back then, and you send money home to my mother on a regular basis and put money aside for college for the next year. And back in those days, which is young people today can't even imagine this, but there were no phones. So you couldn't be in contact with your family. There was no phone in Knockaderry. We had no phone at home. So the only way you could communicate was to write. So you wrote a letter. It took 2 weeks to travel to Ireland, and then you got a letter coming back. So weeks would go by before I knew that they knew that I was here successfully in the United States. So at the end of that year, I went back, and I did this for 3 years, back and forth.
Pause you just for a second, because I want to just listen what you're saying.
Sure.
The hurling part of your life obviously was something that you're very proud of, and rightly so. And you once described, or at least it is said that you described, I'm very reluctant to allocate quotes when they're not the case. You said, show me the sport and I'll indicate the man. That the sport kind of, I come from a family of boxers. But
right. Yeah, sure.
my father sent me to ice skating, so maybe you can share what that means later on with me. But were you someone who had that determination? I know, for instance, that a local farmer told you you would never make university. You hadn't the face for university.
Yeah.
Was that determination that drove you and drives you? Did it come from the poverty? Did it come from the hurting? Did it come from sense of responsibility to look after your family, or do you know where it came from?
Well, I've always been very driven, even as a kid, and I remember very vividly, at home thinking I have got to do something to give my mother a better life, and my brothers and sisters. But my mother was such a wonderful person that put up with a lot of difficulty. And I knew that being the oldest, I was going to do something better with my life. I was not staying in that community. The poverty obviously was a big part of it. I mean, poverty is a great motivator. I mean, I don't regret growing up in poverty. I think it drove me. It gave me that resilience and that tenacity. And the farmer that said to me, isn't it too bad you can never go to college? I used to get very upset about people who kept telling you and telling me and others like me, you can't succeed. I don't take the word can't well. I don't know what it means. To me, there is nothing that is impossible. So when he said to me, isn't it too bad you can't go to college? I remember walking home through the fields that night thinking, every step I took, I said to myself, I am going to college. I am going to college. There is no way a guy like that is going to indicate what my future is going to be like. I'm not going to be subservient to their whims. So in many ways, I look back at him and I thank him, because that was one of the most motivating statements that I'd ever heard. He actually motivated me. He may have thought, I don't think it was malicious on his part. It was just the way it was. And hurling, obviously, to be a good hurler, you got to be pretty competitive. You got to be a little bit tough. I mean, you got to deal with the hurt. And so I've always been very driven, even to this day. I mean, even right now, I'm always worried about how I can improve my circumstance tomorrow, because I'm never happy with where I am. I'm never completely satisfied. It's just part of my DNA.
I want to just talk. You've mentioned your mother on 4 occasions, and I want to talk about the book after the root caved in. And people will read books and they'll have different perspectives. The book is often it is compared to Angela's Actions, another famous book about poverty. And unlike Angela's Actions, your life is a success story, where Angela's Actions was the kind of way doom, gloom, and all of that. But it struck me, I come from a large working class family, and I think all Irish men love their mother, or at least they should. But the book struck me as almost a love story, and a story full of gratitude for this woman against all of the odds, against all the social economic conditions, who never lost faith in you, who never lost her sense, or other children for that matter, who never lost that sense that you could do what you want to do if you tried hard enough.
Yeah.
That in your own thinking?
Yes, I believe optimism is important. I believe resilience is important. I believe that nothing is impossible if you put your mind to it. I like to win. I don't believe in losing. That doesn't mean I don't fail, but I learn from failure so that you can win the next time. So in many ways, I consider myself quite fortunate. And I've never looked back and said, and that's not the reason I wrote the book, and said basically, even while I go up, how I grew up, isn't it amazing what has happened to me? I think that in many ways, growing up the way I grew up strengthened me to be able to do some of the things I did later on. And my mother was somebody that said to me more than once the following kind of statement, not in these words, but she always used to say, don't ever let your circumstance impede your potential. Don't ever play victim. Don't ever say, I can't do something because guess what happened to me? I don't like that. I mean, my attitude is get up in the morning, look at the world, feel grateful that you're there, and then give it the best shot you possibly can. It's like going into a boxing match or going into a hurling game. You're going in to win. You're not going in to say, oh my God, the team I'm up against is great, I can't win. You're going in to win, and you're going to give it your best shot. And life is a series of experiments. Life is ups and downs, etc. And it's a journey, and there's potholes along the way. There are detours. There's traffic jams along the way. But you're going to get to where you want to get to, even though sometimes you're not exactly sure of the destination. I never knew exactly, I didn't have an image of what I actually was going to end up doing, other than I knew it was going to be a lot better than what I was doing at the moment. That I was walking up the ladder all the time.
I'm going to try and illustrate what you did do. So you're in America, you're trying to find your way, you're trying to support your family. There's a sum of money getting sent home.
Right.
But you're focused on what I need to do, what I need to do, how do I need to succeed. So you're in education. You tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I love education. I love learning. I'm a sponge for learning. I mean, and the trouble with learning, of course, and reading is that the more you read, the more you learn, the more you know you don't know, because it just runs. And it's a frustrating thing. So you try to learn history and you read books, and then you find out that so much of the history you don't understand. So you keep learning. So I was always very focused, because of my family background, I think, very focused on the human services and health. That was my main interest. So I went to Fordham University, went there as a student. I worked during the whole time. I ended up graduating from Fordham. I got involved in, I've always been very involved. Even when I was in UCC, I was very involved in student politics. I was chairman of this and chairman of that, and et cetera, et cetera. And then in Fordham, I did the same thing. I graduated. I was working at the time in construction. I was working in plumbing at the time while I was going to Fordham. And I loved every moment of it. When I graduated, after I graduated, they asked me to come back and teach a course as an adjunct. I said, what the heck? That's the other thing, by the way, it is an important lesson, is that when somebody opens a door for you, walk through. Don't sit back and think, and I'm not so sure. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know what's on the other side. Just walk through. You never know what the heck is there, right? So I taught the course. I actually liked it. And the students liked it, which was more important. And I remember sitting there thinking, I can't believe that I'm here teaching a course in a graduate program at Fordham University in Manhattan. And, and the one thing about teaching is that no matter how hard you study as a student, when you become a teacher, you study 10 times harder, because you have to be a book or two ahead of the students, right? And you organize your thought process better. So then they asked me to teach a second course and a third course, and then they asked me to come back full-time on faculty. So I went to Fordham full-time on faculty. I eventually became the assistant dean of Fordham University, of their graduate school. And then they had a campus north of Manhattan up in Westchester, and they asked me to head up that campus. So I became the director of the campus. I taught on faculty in the main program. And then I decided to go for my doctorate at Columbia University. So I got into the doctorate program. I loved it because, again, it was learning, it was education. I went through my whole doctoral studies. I had my dissertation accepted. I went for my examination on the dissertation. I went before the committee. I passed the whole thing. I had a draft of my dissertation all ready to go. It just needed about a month's work. And then I got very lucky. Now, all along the way, I had come across very interesting people. You know, the dean of the university, the president of the university. I used to get involved locally in a lot of local issues, etc. So I got Vernon Jordan, who was the head of the Urban League, a famous individual I got an opportunity to work with. Andrew Young, who worked with Martin Luther King, who was the UN ambassador, I got a chance to work with. So I was influenced by all these spectacular people. And I used to sit there thinking, oh my God, this is amazing that I'm in the room with these people. But then when I'm at Fordham, at Columbia, about to finish my doctorate, Governor Mario Cuomo got elected governor of the state of New York. I did not know him, had not been involved, had never met him. I had seen him. I was on a program one time while I spoke first, and then he spoke much later. I stayed and listened to him. He was absolutely phenomenal. So they called to know whether or not I would be interested in accepting a position in the new administration in Albany, in the governor's new administration. He was putting together a team. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, I can't believe this. I said, why not? The job was in Albany, you know, 2.5 hour drive north of where I was living. I didn't have a car. I didn't know how to get there. I figured, what the hell, I'll take the job. So I took the job, and I came in as the deputy commissioner in the Department of Social Services, which was the largest department. I was in charge of all welfare, everything for the state of New York. And we did a lot of interesting things. I got to meet the governor subsequently, got to do some interesting things. And then one day, the governor called me and said, by the way, I'd like you to come up and be my top person for all health and human services in the state of New York. I want you to be head of health and human services for the state of New York, be deputy secretary to me, be my top person. And my office then was next to his. So for the next, I was there in total 12 years. And for all those, for the last 9 years, 10 years, I was worked closely every single day with the governor. Phenomenal experience. And if you want to get an education, being close to somebody like that, learning from somebody like that. And the one thing that is important, I think all leaders have got to do this. He gave me an opportunity in areas where I basically had no previous experience. I mean, he threw me into the fire. He said, you take over education, health and human services. And I remember thinking, oh my God, you know, I'm gonna succeed though. I'm gonna work my tail off. But he had confidence in me, and he gave me an opportunity. And I think all leaders have got to do that with people coming up, because you never know the kind of talent that's around until you actually give them the opportunity to display it.
I want to say, just in your defense, all these things roll off your tongue as if they're just happening, and they're not happening. Walter Mackin once said that you can take the man from the ball. Walter Mackin, the author, but you can't take the ball from the man. Right. And what we do when we're trying to interview someone like yourself is we try and get a sense from others around them or who know him, you know, or her, what makes them tick. And someone said last night, actually, about you, one of the things about Mick is that he never forgot where he came from, and he never forgot what life needs to do. And he never forgot to put a helping hand in. So I think that's part of the reason, or part of the traction that you had, because you didn't just meet the circle, you became the inner circle with Mark. So, I mean, is that a fair assessment of you, that you've never lost your identity? You've never forgotten what poverty is like?
Yeah. No, I really understand it, so therefore I can relate to it better than most. And I'm still this kid from Knockaderry in many ways. I mean, it's, I never let the titles that you get or the positions you get to your head. You gotta contain your ego. I mean, I know people that move up in the world and all of a sudden they kind of separate themselves from their past a little bit. They try to think of themselves as unique and special. I don't look at it that way. I mean, my view of the world is everybody puts on their pants in the morning the same way, and we may have a title, we may have a position, we get more responsibility, but you've always got to remember your roots. You can't forget it. And humility is a very important ingredient in demonstrating strength. Humility is important.
Sorry, I mentioned in the introduction that when I began to look at your accolades, I ended up looking as to who didn't give you an award. So you had an award from the Jewish community, the academic community, Medicare community, various politicians, and Mario Cuomo being one of them. There's photographs with the Clintons. There's photographs with Obama. There's all of that.
Right.
2017, you were the Grand Marshal of the St. Patrick's Day Parade.
Well, that was extraordinary. I mean, a couple of things that were, to me, were even to this day, I still kind of, had to slap myself to say, how the heck did this happen? One of the amazing things was I got the Ellis Island Medal of Honor at one point, and the amazing thing about that was they induct quite a number of people every year, and then they have a couple of speakers. So I actually asked me to be the speaker in Ellis Island at the time when I got the award. That was extraordinary. And then the Grand Marshal in 2017 was that was absolutely unbelievable. And what was fascinating about that and wonderful about it is my family came over. My only regret is that my mother had passed away and that she was not there at that point. She used to come to the United States regularly. I brought her to the United States every year for 19 years. I would give her an open-ended ticket. She would come over here. She became a very good friend of Governor Mario Cuomo. They became pen pals. And there's an interesting little story. She wrote a note to the governor one time because she read something about me, and she wrote to the governor and said, "Oh, isn't it wonderful what Mike is doing?" And then the governor made a copy of the letter, sent it to me with a cover note from him. And the governor said in his cover note, which I still have, he said, "Attached is a letter from your mother, where she's very, very complimentary toward you. And then he concludes it by saying, "Isn't it amazing," he said, "how you and I have fooled our mothers." But the St. Patrick's Day Parade was just absolutely wonderful. Walking up Fifth Avenue, a place as a kid that you try to imagine, someday maybe I'll be on Fifth Avenue. And all of a sudden you're marching up the head of the parade. Was an extraordinary experience. That's absolutely wonderful.
I know that there's a lot of things in your life that you kind of are extremely proud of, and not least of course your Irish identity, and you're also very proud of America and the opportunities that America stretches out if you're prepared to take them and you're prepared to do all the things. The book of your early life in Ireland, I actually read it a couple of times, and as I said earlier on, and one part of me told me it was a love story, and another part of it, I couldn't help seeing the hurt and the difficulties. How difficult was it to write after the route caved in? Was it a hard task? Was it something that came easily to you?
You mean writing the book? No, people over the years had asked me, because of the fact that I've been in academia, I've been in government, I'm now, head of Northwell, and people would say to me, you should write a story. It's kind of interesting. I really never really wanted to do it. and my wife and others kept pushing. And so my wife finally said to me, she says, why don't you start writing something? You may never publish it. I thought it was and my initial reaction was it was a little too egotistical, self-aggrandizing, to write a book about yourself. And I talked to my family, I talked to my brothers and my sister. I went home to Ireland, I sat with them one night. And I said, people are pushing me to do this. What do you think? And they all said, you should do it. And I said, if I do it, I want it to be honest. I mean, it has to be an honest book. And everybody everybody was fine, all very supportive. And actually, when I wrote it, it was very helpful to me, to be honest. I mean, more helpful than I would have thought. It allowed me to think again about, where you come from. I learned some things about my family I didn't know. For example, I did not know that my mother had gone to school for a period of time to become a nun. I never knew that. My brother Joe, who ran away from home after a fight with my father was a difficult individual. I understand him now. I didn't understand him back then as well. But I never knew what happened to my brother Joe. He went away for a long time. He would never talk about it. So I would have asked him over the years, what happened that night? Where did you go? He would never talk about it. Yet in doing the book, he spoke about it. So to me, in many ways, it was kind of therapeutic for me, writing the book. And again, as I tell people, it's an immigrant story. And that is a part of everybody's life in the book. Everybody has their unique story. I mean, and many of them, obviously, many people's stories much, much more difficult than mine. But yeah, it was therapeutic.
I think the book, I would commend the book for anyone to read. I think the book, as you say, it's about your family. It's about immigration. It's about a family surviving difficulties. It's about the love of a mother and a father to their children. It's about you. It's about that sense. You're 50 years in America, and I looking at your eyes and trying to get a sense of you, I think it went like that. I think that you have skipped.
Yeah, it has gone remarkably fast. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. And there is still so much more to do. I am as excited today about what I do as I was 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. At Northwell, we're a very large organization. We're the largest employer in New York State. I get up every morning. I get up around 4:15 every morning. I leave home around 5:20, 5:30, and I can't wait to get going. And I enjoy every moment of it, and I enjoy the people I work with, and I've surrounded myself with very good people, smart people who care. Because at the end of the day, you want to be with people who are compassionate, who are caring, who understand the humanity that exists between us, the interdependence of all of us, the fact that we're there for a purpose to improve. We've got to leave something a little bit better from when we found it. So when you leave, hopefully, people are a little bit better off, especially when you work in healthcare. It's a special calling. And I tell employees, I meet every new employee that is hired in the organization. I meet every employee. We hire about 150 to 200 people a week. I meet them all in the group every Monday morning because I think it's important. But I emphasize that you don't have a job at Northwell. You have an obligation and a responsibility. You're here to make a difference. You're here to take care of other people the right way. You're here to make a positive, distinctive impact. You're not here to survive and just exist. You're here to do something special. And I feel as strongly about that today as I did way back then. And again, I feel very privileged. I feel very lucky that I have had the benefit of being around great people, learning from great people, being influenced by great people. But I'm a workaholic. I mean, I work 7 days a week. I mean, if you were to tell me, to take off a week and go to the beach and put my legs up and give me a gun, I'd probably shoot myself. I mean, I just love work. And some people think that that's a negative. To me, for me personally, it's very positive.
I said earlier on that I wouldn't throw quotes at you and ask you to justify it, but I'm going to break my word and I'm going to do that. And I understand, speaking to you, the drive that you have within your life and the relationship to sport and to that kind of all of that. You're quoted in one of my research papers as saying that you would enjoy giving Donald Trump a hurdle and seeing Harry was fair on the pitch. You suspect that he would go to the hills. Is that a quote of you, or did someone make that up?
I think I said something like that. I mean, Donald Trump was a stain on the American character. A guy with every attribute you should not want to have. A guy who promoted hate, who promoted disunity, who didn't understand, in my view, what America is about or what humanity is about. He gave oxygen to hate instead of giving oxygen to hope. And he will be a little afterthought in history, I believe. And we, whether it's the United States or any place else, we're better than that. We're better, we've got to come together. The amount of opportunity we have to be working together to improve things is extraordinary. You can't have somebody as your leader who promotes constant division, the whole philosophy. And his policy is a policy of grievance. And look what everybody's doing to me. Nobody likes me. The media hates me. You hate me. Yeah, but you got to ask yourself the question. I mean, what are you going to do that's positive? So, yes, I think I made a statement like that. I've met Donald Trump once or twice, but many, many years ago. And I'm so glad, and I think the United States is very fortunate that he is no longer a leader, even though he's still trying to be an informal leader. But I think history will dismiss him over time.
I want to move on in our last few minutes just to talk about something else, but let me give a quote about you, which I think is a very nice quote. And the someone who talked, I asked how difficult was it for you and for the business that you're in to meet the dangers of the pandemic? How difficult was it to organize? How difficult was it to plan? And they said that, yeah, he worked 48 hours a day to try and meet that. And you talk about being a workaholic and all that. But they also said that you managed, which is a rarity, and like you managed to inspire others to work 48 hours a day. And that Northwell was to the front of providing defense against it. Was that a big challenge, physically, mentally?
Well, the way you see, to me, if you know history, there have been many greater challenges than this pandemic. It was difficult, but it's not the greatest challenge people have ever dealt with. And, bad things happen to people. Bad circumstances occur. It's how you react to those circumstances that define you. So the pandemic came, and so my view of the world is it's here, it's coming at us, we have to buckle down, and we've got to deal with this, and we are going to win against this. There is no way this pandemic is going to defeat us. We are coming out at the other side of this the winner. We're not putting up the white flag. We don't have a defeatist attitude. We have an optimistic attitude. So, and what I did all during the pandemic, I walked the floors of every hospital almost every day. I was in every COVID unit. And when you're out there with the troops on the front lines, first of all, it informs you about what really is going on. I believe it helps inspire the people on the front lines. And we've actually treated well over 200,000 COVID patients. We were at the epicenter. We had 3,500 COVID patients in our hospitals on a daily basis. Nobody else in the United States has had anything like this. And we handled it well. Well, we did it because we have a great team of people. It was everybody pulling together in unity, in unison, people helping each other, people coming together, which is what people do in a crisis. And what you got to do is you got to inspire, as I like to tell people all the time, you don't light a fire under people, light a fire in people. And healthcare people are special because people want to belong to a cause, and healthcare employees are unique. So they didn't work for Northwell during that period of time only. They belonged to a cause, which was defeat COVID, take care of people to the best of our ability, save lives. There is no greater calling than that. That should inspire anybody when you have the opportunity to save a person's life. If that's not inspiring, I don't know what is.
I want to try and squeeze in the 3 last questions. And I always keep the difficult questions to the last. No, I'm only joking. 50 years in America. I mean, if someone's going to come in and listen to the program and go, that guy never left Limerick. That's a Limerick accent. I know that accent.
Yeah.
Has the Irish American community in that 50 years, has it changed? And if it has, is it for the better?
The Irish community in America? Oh, I think the Irish community in America has made an unbelievable contribution to the United States, just like other communities, whether it be the African American community, the German community, etc. The Irish community, I believe, over the years has definitely been an enhancement. I think we work together. We know a lot of us know each other here. The Irish American community, they love America, they love Ireland. And there is no better combination than that. You know, it's amazing to meet people, Irish Americans over here, that have never been to Ireland, but it lives inside them. And then, of course, many of them have. But I think the Irish American community, have been great leaders here. And many of us are getting together on a regular basis so we can continue to promote the Irishness and in us, and the Americanism in us. So it's that combination, and I think that it's a special community actually.
I know that you have your interest in Ireland has never wavered even for a moment. So I just have to say for recognition that without Irish America's interest, the peace that we enjoy at the moment in Ireland, which is not a perfect peace, but my little is perfect. But it wouldn't have happened without the intervention of Irish America. It wouldn't have happened, whatever you may think or not about the Clintons, but it was the Irish American community and that influence that opened up the potential for change, for a new view of Ireland, under Biden. Is there still the potential that relationship? America has huge financial resources, as you know, and that is huge financial interest in Ireland. Is there still an enjoyment that an Irish American can bring to Ireland?
Oh, yes. I mean, I completely agree with you that what has happened in Northern Ireland would have been very difficult without George Mitchell, without Bill Clinton, without so many other people I know that have been very, very, very involved. And Joe Biden, he takes unbelievable pride in his Irish background.
We know
he talks about it. I've been fortunate to have had lunch with him, etc., on a number of occasions. He talks about it, and I do believe that he will, be, visiting Ireland. I know he's very committed, and I believe that community over here is still very, very committed to making sure that peace maintains. And I know we've had some little difficulty over the last couple of weeks, but those are skirmishes. But I know that the Irish community is unbelievably committed to making sure that peace is lasting, and that we continue to build unity and come together. If people come together, it's amazing what can be accomplished because you use the resources for the good of everybody, and that has to be a continuing motivating principle. And I know it is for Irish Americans over here.
I'm going to ask you another unfair question, and I'm sure you're regretting that you put yourself up for it. If there was, and I mentioned the the achievements and the accolades and the respect that you obviously enjoy from the medical profession, from your industrial relations with people, from the Irish American community, the Hall of Fame, the Irish American Hall of Fame, drama. Is there one single thing that you could say, that's me, that's what I'm proud of? Or is it just a combination of them all?
Well, I think the one thing that stands for me personally is like all of these accolades, all of these awards are all great, it's terrific. But for me, be good to your family. Keep the family close. Be committed to family. And I have a family here, and I have a family in Ireland. If I do that well, and I leave my kids with something to be proud of, and get them positioned so that they can do good going forward, that to me is the most important.
I want to leave you on that very, very last word, but can I just say this? If I had read your life story in a book or saw it in a film, I wouldn't have believed it. The journey that you took is not only an amazing journey, it's a mind-blowing journey from a thatched house with a mud floor, no toilet, no heating, no light, to the grandeur of being with the great and the good is such a journey. And for sharing that with us, Michael, can I thank you very much? I know you're extremely busy, and I know you've taken time out and cancelled meetings, but thank you very much. So from me,
Well, I thank you so much for the privilege of being able to talk to you. I thank you, and to everybody that listens, say, be optimistic, be positive, give oxygen to hope, as I've said many times. And, the future is always going to be better. Just keep working on it. And to everybody in my family in Ireland, I mean, just the best of health to everybody. So I'm delighted anytime. And hopefully when I come to Ireland, which my guess is will be sometime in the fall, that maybe we can actually get together and talk about boxing, which I'm a big fan of, by the way.
But listen, be my guest.
Okay.
Reservation for you. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.